Hello and welcome to Thursday's Terrace Scottish Football Podcast. My name is Fraser Clarke and today I'm joined by the Terrace's second favourite Falkirk TV commentator, Sean Elderbrant. Sean, how's it going?
Very well. That's quite the introduction. But no, yeah, good to be here. Good to finally get an actual chat with you in real life. We've kind of known each other through the Twitter sphere for a fair few years, but it's nice to kind of have an actual chat.
I know it is always nice to meet people in real life for the first time live on a podcast that's going to go out to masses, and now it needs to seem like we know each other really well when we've just sort of liked each other's tweets for about 5 years.
That's it. It's like we've been kind of flirting online for years, and this is the first date, and hoping it goes well and nobody kind of spills any drinks on each other.
This is the first date, and we're going to have several hundred people listening, so that's absolutely fantastic.
Does feel very modern, sorry.
It's this modern way of working, getting to know people. Now, for some unknown reason, we've been handed the reins to a very special edition of the Lower League show this week, where myself and Sean are going to imagine that Scotland has an international C team. Now, down south, this is for non-league players, but we've decided to make it part-time players for this show. We spent far too long when we should have been working devising the rules for this, and they're now quite simple. You can only pick one player from each club, and we agreed to have one designated superstar. That's a full-time player from a lower league side. We've both got our 11s ready, we've got our reasoning at the ready, and as always, we'd be delighted if you did not get upset at us because we didn't pick your favourite player. Get over it. So, first of all, before we get started, Sean, how did you find it compiling your 11?
It was good fun, to be fair. It was challenging as well because you've got so many clubs to pick from, so many players to pick from, and obviously each club has got a few players who you think, yeah, they might be quite good, Then you're having to kind of decide which one is best and which one's going to fit the team best. So yeah, good fun, as you say. A good few minutes, hours wasted when I should have probably been doing more productive things, but hours and minutes which were very much enjoyed.
I ended up justifying some of my selections to myself based on how well I thought they would play together, which is just a completely stupid way of doing it. But then I had to read it out to my other half, and I was just like, so if we put this guy in central midfield, I think this guy will complement him. And she was just looking at me completely glazed over, like no interest at all. But I justified it to myself, so that was reassuring. So I feel very confident that if anyone wants to disagree with my picks, then I can justify them.
Yeah, I feel kind of the same. I was kind of thinking not just personnel, but how they might play together. So one of my particular picks is in a forward position is almost a kind of half complement one of my other forward players, and we'll probably get to that later on.
I'm extremely excited. I'm excited to see who we both pick as well. But we'll start with in goals. And Sean, who is your number one for your C international team?
Okay, so I have gone for arguably one of the very best part-time goalkeepers right now, which is Stirling Albion's Blair Curry. So reasoning behind that, I think he's been arguably one of the most consistent performers in goal in League One all season long. You know, it's a division where your top two teams, Falkirk and Hamilton, both have goalkeeping situations which haven't been exactly kind of one person's played the whole season. So Falkirk have had two young goalkeepers in the form of Sam Long and Nicky Hogarth, who have kind of shared duties. And Hamilton have Ryan Fulton, who is obviously one of the very best goalkeepers in the lower leagues, but he's been injured for a long time. So in terms of kind of goalkeepers who have played a lot of football and have been particularly good, Blair Curry's right up there. I think he's joint top of the clean sheets chart in League One with 9. Alongside Sam Long with Falkirk. Obviously, Falkirk are benefited of probably having a better defence than Stirling Albion. So Blair Curry to be up there for clean sheets as well as saves as well. I think he's like third in the saves chart. And just also the kind of eye test of every time I've seen Blair Curry this season, particularly against Falkirk, that's my team who I obviously covered doing the commentary as well. I've been really impressed with him. He's made some big saves, made some important saves. He's made 3 penalty saves against Hamilton this season. And yeah, I think he's just a really good, competent goalkeeper and my number one for this imaginary Scotland C team.
Really good with the ball at his feet as well, which is always a benefit in international football when you've maybe got that wee bit more time in the ball.
Absolutely. He's definitely someone who's kind of adept at shot stopping, but also kind of his wider game as well.
So I've gone with somebody who I knew straight away from something you gave away when we were talking off air that he wouldn't be your number one. I've gone on the basis that Scotland goalkeepers all get better with age. So like the closer you are to 40, you're probably better as a Scotland goalkeeper. And I've gone with Derek Gaston, Arbroath. Now, previously, we would have probably all picked Thomas O'Brien as our one go-to Arbroath player, but he's not really been at the races this season. Maybe Ricky Little as well, maybe Mikey McKenna. Arbroath haven't had a great season. And I think large aspects of that, maybe not large aspects, but certainly aspects, has been when Derek Gaston is out the team. He's 37, I think, this month. He's 37 soon anyway. And he has been probably one of the most reliable goalkeepers in the lower leagues, really, well, over a decade now since he stepped up. I think he came from amateur football into Albion Rovers, looked really, really decent straight away. He's got his colossal long kick on him, just really solid. Like, he's probably not the most flashy goalkeeper about. He's not the most exciting. Maybe his best days are behind him. But Derek Gaston is my choice. I'm being completely distracted because we're doing this with Craig Fowler away, and his cat is just looking right down the barrel of his webcam. She's just completely put me off my stride. So Derek Gaston is my number one for my imaginary Scotland C team, on the basis that, well, David Marshall and Craig Gordon have been really, really good the older they get. Derek Gaston, straight in there.
Yeah, perfect. I think that's a really fair pick, to be honest, and it was one that I definitely considered. And I said to you kind of before we started, controversially, I haven't actually picked anyone from Arbroath, just almost for the reason that you said there, in terms of they're kind of struggling at the bottom of the championship. Guys like kind of O'Brien, McKenna, Little, etc., maybe not having their best season so far, and so for that reason I haven't got anyone from Arbroath. But kind of going on to next pick at right back, probably the most natural place to start. I'm guessing you've gone for a four at the back.
Yes, I went for a bog standard 4-4-2 because I wanted two strikers in there because they're the most fun to talk about. Nice.
I've actually went for a 4-3-3, so I'll go next, and I'll say that my right back is Mr. Reliable from the promotion-chasing Wasps in League One, Scott Taggart.
Yes, same. Yes, I knew that we would both pick Scott Taggart because he's just so solid, and he takes penalties and he never misses a game.
Absolutely, that's kind of a good chunk of my reasoning there. The fact that he's just such a steady hand at right back. He's been so consistent for Alloa in the Championship and League One. You know, he's just one of those players that you can rely on for a 6, 7, 8 out of 10 every week. As I say, played practically every minute in League One this season, 6 goals. He's a penalty specialist, you know, just a really dab hand at fullback, you know, someone who you can kind of think in the old Stephen O'Donnell for Scotland, kind of just solid, will do your turn, and I'm sure will be a very capable right back in this hypothetical team.
Of all the decisions that Dumbarton have made over the years in terms of getting rid of players, and there has been some howlers in there, getting rid of Scott Taggart is one of those ones that still rankles with me, because I always liked him when he was at Suns. He was obviously playing in the Championship. He came to us from Morton. He had a really good season at Morton, and I thought he was actually going to kick on into the Premiership. Then the following season was that chaotic time at Morton in the 10-2 game at Hamilton. Kenny Shields was in. They had a squad that was made up of just ringers and deadbeats, and it was just hopeless. And Suns took him, and I thought that's a real coup getting him in. And he made right back position his own, and then Stevie Aitken came in. And he started the season really, really well. But then he signed Stephen Saunders. Saunders displaced Taggart, and he was basically used almost exclusively as a sub, I think, for the remainder of that season. It seemed to be after 67 minutes, Kevin Colley used to go off, and Scott Taggart used to come on every single week. That's the substitution that Suns made. He left at the end of the season. He's gone to Alloa, contributed to Suns being relegated, along with Jordan Kirkpatrick, Gary Fleming, Andy Graham, just this whole raft of players that we got rid of at the time. And I think he's missed probably like a handful of games in that time. What's that coming up for 6 or 7 seasons now? It must have been that he's been at Recreation Park. Like, touch wood from an Alloa point of view that we're not jinxing him here. He just seems to be one of these really steady performers, like doesn't miss a game, not injury prone, reliable. He can play in central midfield, he can play at centre half. So if something, you know, this Scotland C team goes down to 10 men and we need someone to fill in, he can do it. And he can take penalties, which actually is something that I use a few times to justify my picks, is that I need players who can take penalties under a bit of pressure.
Yeah, I think I've got a few set piece specialists in there as well. So kind of thinking about all kind of corners, free kicks, penalties, and whatnot. But yeah, Scott Taggart, just a really sensible pick, I'd say.
Really sensible pick. Now I've gone at centre back, and I was right up until now. I've been kind of tossing up between 2 Stenhousemuir players because I think you need to have a Stenny centre half in this team. Maybe you've not, but I feel like you need to. They've just been so good defensively this season. 18 clean sheets, I think it is, in the league. And I was tossing up between Gregor Buchanan, who I could talk about at great length from his time, or his 2 stints at Dumbarton, and Nicky Jamieson. who played one game as a trialist for Dumbarton actually, and wore the number 9 shirt and played at left back. But I have gone with Jameson purely on the basis that he's a bit younger. That's solely the basis that I picked there, and I think that I need younger legs beside my other centre half, who won't be someone that you picked. But I picked Nicky Jameson there. I think he's probably, if not the best centre back in League Two, in the top two. The other one being probably Gregor Buchanan, certainly based on performances this season. I think he's been a huge part of Stenny's success this year. I think he'll complement the guy who I've got him alongside, who's a bit more experienced. Not that Jameson isn't obviously experienced at this level, but yeah, I went for Nicky Jameson there because I needed a Stenny centre half. But that also means that I couldn't put Matty Yates in the team, and I really wanted to put him in the team as well. There was actually a few Stenny players, Darren Jameson and goals I thought about, but Nicky Jameson just pips Gregor Buchanan to that spot. But I suppose Nicky Jameson didn't turn down a deal at Dumbarton in the summer and moved to one of our rivals as well. So take that, Gregor. No international call-up for you.
Well, that's very fair, and well, kind of shock you, this is our kind of second match in the back line. I also have Nicky Jameson for pretty much every reason that you just explained there. Yeah, just a really solid, consistent performer for Stenny, as you say. Their kind of title push has been built upon clean sheets, defence, just a really solid backline, and he's a player who has been really impressive for the Warriors this season, as you say, alongside Gregor Buchanan, who I did also kind of think of picking. Matty Yates as well, as you said, he was also a consideration from Stenny, but no, I think Nicky Jameson's just a really solid defensive player, as you say, kind of favours that left side as well, so brings a bit of balance to the defence. He's a player at a decent age at 27. There's still room for improvement there, and I think that when Stenny's impending promotion is confirmed, I think he's the type of player who will be able to kick on in League One next season. And also, I believe they've only lost one League Two game this season with him playing, and that actually came at the Rock against Dumbarton.
That would have been at home against Dumbarton, actually. It would have been at Ochilview.
Apologies.
Where he turned in one of the worst 25 minutes of football that I've ever seen. I don't know what happened. He went from being really solid and reliable, dreadful, and then back to being really solid and reliable. I have no idea what happened. It was just bizarre. His son scored 4 goals in round about 25 minutes. I was stood in the away end at Ochilview thinking this is absolutely great. They think that they're up for the title challenge. Yeah, this mob, they're all over the place. Yeah, that didn't end too well, especially if they win the league at the Rock. Right, okay, I've gone for my next centre half. Somebody who I thought was considerably older than he was, and when I googled him I was quite shocked that he was only 34. Similar to your reasoning with Blair Curry, one of the better defences in League One that have gone kind of under the radar, Stirling Albion. So I've gone for Paul McLean. He's just really, really solid. He's just a really decent League One player. I think he'll be a good influence around the dressing room. I wouldn't be averse to him being my captain of this team. I think he's got good leadership qualities. He's good in the air and pops up with goals from time to time. I think he'll complement Jameson quite well. So you've got Jameson's a wee bit more athletic, but McLean can maybe just guide him through games. He can use his experience to just know when to sit a wee bit deeper, give himself a yard. He also seems to be somebody who's getting a wee bit better with age. So he was always, like at Brecon, it feels like he'd been around at Brecon for a long time because I'm sure Jim Duffy signed him there and that was a long time ago. But it felt like he was fine. He was like a perfectly decent part-time player. Now you're looking at him thinking probably one of the maybe not one of the best part-time players in the country, that's stretching it, but somebody who gets in most part-time teams, certainly every part-time squad, maybe with the exception of Arbroath just because of the level they're at. So Paul McLean is my man and possibly my captain.
Yeah, I think that's a good shout. Every time I've seen Paul McLean this season, again, playing against Falkirk, he's one of those players who has been quite impressive just in general in League One. As you say, he seems to be getting better with age. It's one of those, just a solid pick. That's probably the best way that you could describe Paul McLean, just a really solid, serviceable centre-back. So my next pick for centre-back probably seems quite rash when you look at the positioning of his club in the SPFL right now. I've actually gone for a centre-back who is playing with the bottom club in the SPFL right now. I've gone for Clyde's Lee Hamilton. And the reason behind that is I've seen Lee Hamilton playing for Edinburgh City quite a few times earlier in the season against Falkirk. And he was a player who always really impressed me, just a really defend-first centre-back. Put in a really good performance against Falkirk at Meadowbank earlier in the season. Falkirk were 2-0 winners on that day. Could have probably been 3-4, 5-0 winners on that day if it wasn't for Lee Hamilton. Some really important tackles and blocks and whatnot. I was really surprised to see that he turned up at Clyde when he left Edinburgh City. I'll be honest, when he left City, I kind of assumed that he'd end up getting another League One move at least. Well, I say at least, probably another League One move. I was quite surprised to see him drop into League Two. I was, like I say, really impressed with him. Every time I've seen him play so far this season, he was part of that City team which won promotion from League Two, and since he's joined Clyde, 13 appearances and only 3 defeats compared to Clyde's previous 17 matches when they had 10 defeats. So certainly went in there and kind of showed up that defence.
Slightly kicking myself for not even considering him, purely because I looked at Clyde, I looked at Bonnyrigg, and I kind of thought, nah. Like, there's some really good players in Clyde's squad, and if Jordan Allen had been eligible, possibly would have been tempted by him. But I kind of was just like, nah, I won't really touch them with a barge pole. But no, it's a solid shout. And I think the way I look at Clyde is, although they're bottom of the league at the time that we're recording this, they may not be by the time that you hear it. And although they've been at the bottom of the league, you almost have to look at Clyde from January as like a new club, like a new entity, with the guys they brought in are at a far, far higher quality than what they had before. And I think Lee Hamilton is probably the pick of the bunch, maybe between him and Jordan Allen in terms of the players they've brought in. And you would imagine if they can keep Allen for next season, they've got Hamilton signed up, like that's potentially the best centre-half in the league and the best striker in the league, and they'll really fancy their chances. I've been tipping Clyde for the turn of the year. I actually started to think maybe they could push towards the playoffs. Took Ian McCall a very long time to get that sorted, but now I think we're seeing it, and Lee Hamilton has been a huge part of that.
Yeah, absolutely. As you say, just the difference kind of since January, of course, pretty much a new 11, barring a few players. Yeah, Jordan Allen's another player who I would have definitely considered, but being on loan from Falkirk, that was kind of one of our rules that we decided that no players who are contracted to a full-time team were allowed, unless it was your special designated player, which I'm very excited to see who yours is. That was one of the most interesting things, but not as interesting as who you've got left back, because that was a position I struggled most to fill. And if you've picked the same man as me, then I'm going to turn off this stream and we're just going to go and do something else, because surely you haven't. So I kind of struggled with left back as well, and I've just went for somebody who, again, is just a nice, steady customer, someone who has been fairly reliable for quite a while, and that has been Montrose's Andrew Steeves.
Not who I picked, because I wanted another Montrose player, but was the first choice that came to mind, and then I thought, it's only left back, I'll sacrifice him and I'll bring in somebody further up the pitch.
Yeah, that's very fair. Montrose, I've got a lot of really kind of good players in those like midfield and attacking areas. Blair Lyons is one I considered. Graham Webster is another, but I went for Andrew Steeves. I needed a left back, and he's one of those guys who he's been with Montrose for years and years now. He was part of that team which won the Pyramid playoff initially, and just to avoid relegation out of the SPFL, and part of a title-winning team from League Two, and he's been just a consistent performer. He's played over 300 appearances for the club now. He's just a good, solid option at left back, full of energy. And I was quite surprised to learn that he's only 29 years old because he's been around so long. I just assumed, with likes of Paul Watts and Terry Masson, I just assumed he was in his mid-30s, but no, still only 29.
That is incredible. I assumed he'd certainly crossed his 30s, but he's potentially 2 or 3 years older than me. But it feels like he's been playing since I was at primary school. It does seem like he's been about for a very long time. Andrew Steeves was one of my favourite players in the lower leagues, actually. And one of these guys, I know Dumbarton are never going to sign him. I think he's Dundee based. Just one of these guys that you'd if I was to go into Dumbarton and you'd be like, right, there's your budget, just go and assemble a squad, he would probably be my pick. And just, ignore where he lives and ignore the fact that he's clearly very happy at Montrose. He'd be one of the players I'd pick. I'm a huge, huge fan of Andrew Steeves. And to be honest, as regular listeners will know, just Montrose in general, just a club I've got a lot of time for. A club that I own one of their tops. So trying to think in terms of other Scottish football tops I own a Queen's Park top and a Montrose top and a St Johnstone top. I think that's it. So Montrose are in that sort of select group. The player I've gone with, so this was the last position I filled, mainly because the players I wanted were either at other clubs or were full-time and on loan or something like that. So I have gone for Stranraer's Finn Ekstrapon. Now, my working behind this is threefold. Firstly, he scored a goal from inside his own half, so that definitely scores you major points in that front. Secondly, he's really, really good in the ball. He's a good deliverer of set pieces, and that's useful. I've got another guy in my team who I think will take most of the set pieces, but if he goes off, Finn Ekstrapon can be my man, particularly his in-swinging corners. Really big fan of that. Also, his surname sounds a bit French, so if it turns out that he is in fact world class, then we've got him before France have got him. I've no idea if he's eligible for France. I've no idea if it is French. Just Ecripon sounds French. So we can get in there before that.
Yeah, absolutely. It's one of those names I can remember. I believe it was I was doing for a commentary game a good few years, a couple of years back. I remember when he was obviously he's on loan from Ayr United, isn't he?
He was. He's now permanent.
He's now
eligible.
Yeah, now eligible. Sorry. So yeah, I remember seeing him as part of the Ayr United squad and just being curious as to how do you pronounce that. But yeah, Ecripon. It does sound very, very French.
And there's the further benefit that his brother, Ollie, I think it's Ollie, who's on loan at East Stirlingshire at the moment, is apparently absolutely class. So then you could have Ollie, the goalkeeper, and Finn, a left back. They're going to know each other inside out. It's a nice wee partnership there to have the two brothers in the team like that. So maybe I'm looking at, longer term. They're both quite young. Maybe 10 years' time we'll have I think Ollie Ecripon, 17, 18, something like that. 28-year-old goalkeeper, maybe 31-year-old fullback. Brothers, both know each other inside out. Both turned down France to play for Scotland. Fantastic. That's what I want.
Just a good story, isn't it?
It's just a really nice story. So, if anyone's, I think they're from Ayrshire as well. So if any of my colleagues at the Ayrshire Post are listening in 10 years' time to this podcast as part of research, then they can say that it was first touted on the terrace in April 2024. So for my right winger, I have picked my designated player. This is the bit I've been most looking forward to, actually, to see who we both pick as our designated player. And I've gone for someone who I suspect that you'll know very well and be able to talk about at great length. I've gone for Falkirk's Callum Morrison. So for my money, probably the most exciting player in Scottish football, certainly the lower leagues to watch at the moment. I was kind of tempted looking into the Championship and thinking, who did I fancy from there? But nobody stuck out as much as Morrison from League One. So if I wasn't picking him, it would only have been because he's in League One, and that's not really his fault. So you look at it, I think he's got more than 20 goals already this season. It'll be handy having a Falkirk commentator who'll have all these notes to hand. But yeah, I think he's got more than 20 goals this season. He's a penalty taker. He's capable of coming up with moments of magic. He's good for a stunning goal. He's good for taking penalties. He's decent at set pieces. But he's also, and this is really important to my team, he's also versatile. So he can play right wing back. He could probably do a shift at right back for me. He could play up front if I wanted him to. Through the middle, we could switch on wings. So I went for Callum Morrison as my designated player, based on, a whole number of factors, but I think that versatility is what maybe gave him the edge, because I can't think of any player who I could bring in, who I could maybe play up front and back to score a couple of goals, or go, right, okay lads, we've got a few injuries, this fictional team is struggling. Scott Taggart's just gone off in a once-in-a-lifetime thing where he's actually got injured and had to go off during a game. I'll need to put Callum Morrison back to right back, and I think he'll do a job for me there.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, you said over 20 goals already this season, 21 in League One. He is currently the top scorer in all four SPFL divisions, overtook both Rumar Burrell and Lawrence Shankland last weekend with a 4-goal haul against Edinburgh City. And yeah, like you say, he's been pretty incredible for Falkirk this season. And going back further, I've described him as being a bit of a kind of shining light in dark times for Falkirk. He was the one player when Falkirk were kind of mid-table in League One and quite miserable to watch at times. He was the one player who would always kind of get you off your seat, whether that's taking a player on, just having that little burst of pace, burst of energy, and as you say, being able to create kind of moments of magic from out of nowhere. Kind of countless goals that he scored for Falkirk now from long range, from different sort of situations. The one that sticks out this season, of course, is the goal in the 3-2 win over Montrose, 92nd or 93rd minute winner, which was an absolute screamer into the top corner, and it was pretty early on in the season and kind of set the tone for much of what this Falkirk team has been about this season, kind of relentless, never giving up, and just making sure that they get over the line by hook or by crook. And I don't think it will surprise you to know that he is also my designated player as well. Unlike you're going 4-4-2. I've got my 4-3-3 set up. He's going to be playing the right of the front three. But no, fully agree with pretty much everything that you've just said there, and so much more. Like, he just has that swagger about him, and the kind of way he carries himself. And I really do think that he's kind of thriving and flourishing in this Falkirk team. We're so lucky to have him tied down for another 2 years. And I think kind of one of the factors why he is committing his future to Falkirk is probably that, I think he seems to thrive and kind of relish being that main man. He is Falkirk's kind of jewel in the crown. He is the superstar. He is the one who's scoring over 20 goals from playing out wide. And yeah, as you say, so versatile, can play in a number of positions, but I think he is probably most effective in that kind of front three. So that's why I've got him there.
I think it's a really good point you made about, him being that shining light in dark times for Falkirk, because it's really, really easy for an attacking player to stand out in a good team. Like, how many times have we seen a player who looks like a world beater, all of a sudden form tails off, confidence tails off, and that player just disappears? The fact that he's done it so consistently in probably, I would imagine, certainly the worst Falkirk team in your lifetime, if not one of the worst Falkirk teams of all time, certainly based on where they finished in the leagues. Like, the fact he's been able to do that speaks volumes about his attitude. And, I'm looking at it again from this purely fictional Scotland Sea scenario. When the going gets tough, you want somebody who'll really dig in and who'll be able to still produce performances that come up with a wee bit of magic, a bit of quality on the ball, who'll never give up. Like, if he's been able to do that for, Martin Rennie's Falkirk at the darkest of days for Falkirk Football Club, like, he should be able to do it with a Scotland top on, you'd imagine.
Yeah, you'd think so. I mean, like I say, this season he's just kind of kicked on so much. I mean, he was, as I say, he was excellent for his last season. I think he was in both the SPFL and PFA League One Team of the Years last year. But this season, I think he's, at the moment, I mean, it'd be hard pushed to see anyone else pick up the League One Player of the Year award right now. I mean, there's probably a fair few nominations from a Falkirk side, and you would have maybe said Roman Burrell would have been in with a shout if obviously Morrison hadn't overtaken his goal tally, but can't really see anyone else taking that mantle, and he has just really kicked on. He's grown so much in confidence, self-belief and whatnot, and I think he just really suits the kind of the playing style of this Falkirk team, and yeah, we're seeing the rewards pretty much every week now.
The Hamilton fans must be gutted that they missed out after they were just, set to sign him just a few months ago, I'm sure I read.
Yeah, set to sign him, Agyeman and Calvin Miller all in one fell swoop apparently. So I don't know what happened there, but it seems like they're going to be picking up League One winners' medals at the end of the season.
Moving into central midfield then, and you can go first for this one, seeing as I got in early with Callum Morrison. Your central midfielder number one.
Okay, first central midfielder for me is, for my money, one of the best part-time players at the moment. Arguably a player who I'll go on to say that I'm really surprised that he dropped into part-time football when he did, and that is Reece Lyon of Kelty Hearts. Just an excellent all-round midfielder. Someone who has his class on the ball, can be a driving force from deep. Can kind of contribute slightly higher up the park, but just a really, really well-rounded footballer. I remember when he was first kind of left Greenock Morton. I think just over, it would have been 2 seasons ago now. At the end of 2 seasons ago. Anyway, I remember when he left, kind of looking at it, thinking that's who Falkirk should be signing. I think I actually put out a tweet saying, "Go and get him, Falkirk. That'd be a fantastic pickup for us." But obviously, went to Annan Athletic initially. Again, when you seen him signing for Annan, you were kind of a bit like, I don't know, I thought somebody further up the food chain. Absolutely no disrespect to Annan, but you would expect somebody in League One at least to think he's a very, very good football player and could do it as a turn. But no, went to Gallowbank, done a fantastic job, a key component in Annan's kind of promotion last season. And yeah, has moved to Kelty again, maybe a slight surprise because you kind of expected him to maybe go to, say, a Falkirk or a Hamilton or a Queen's. But no, he's went to Kelty Hearts and has been a real shining light in that midfield, generally kind of playing alongside Michael Tidser, the player manager. And yeah, he's just a really enjoyable player to watch, and it's kind of no wonder that Hamilton were apparently trying to poach him in January. It seemed as though it was he's signing for Accies, and then it got to the end of January and he was still at New Central Park. But yeah, I think he's the type of player who will really kind of thrive in this make-believe Scotland team.
Yeah, exactly like you say as well. I was, again, no disrespect intended to the teams, but I was really surprised when I ended up at Annan. And then last season I thought, certainly towards the end of the season, especially when Suns got beaten by them 6-0 in the playoffs and 3-1 down at Gallowbank. And on that day, Stevie Farrell said it could have been 9 or 10. So those 2 games, Annan absolutely bossed us. And it was all, maybe not all, but mainly down to Reece Lyon in midfield. Like, he just didn't look like he was breaking a sweat, but he was absolutely running the show from in there. And I thought, based on his performances at the end of the season, I would have been sure he would have ended up at one of Falkirk or Hamilton probably over the summer. So when he went to Kelty, I don't know, part of me was a bit surprised. The other part of me looks at it and goes, I can only assume there's an issue between him and Dougie Imrie at Morton, because there's no way that Reece Lyon would be the sort of player who gets so easily discarded by a club like Morton if there isn't, whatever's gone on behind the scenes. Maybe they don't see eye to eye, or he doesn't fit how Emery wants to play, or whatever the issue, or whatever happened behind the scenes there happened. But I think that they will rue letting him go. I suspect that they possibly to a degree already do, and they see how well he's playing. And then when I saw Hamilton linked with him in January, I thought, yep, that's a really nice fit. That's exactly the sort of player Hamilton should be signing. It's exactly the right sort of move for him, probably. Just step back up into full-time football, and then perhaps work your way into the Championship, either as a member of an Aki side that gets promoted, or impress for them for a couple of seasons and then get a move to a club in the Championship. But I'm really, really surprised that nobody else came in. I think it's really good to see him flourishing at Kelty, because I think he's such a nice player to watch above all else. Just like, he's such a quality player to watch. But I don't know how Kelty replaced him over the summer. And he was somebody that I was toying with putting in my team. And the only reason I didn't was the fact that Suns played Kelty earlier in the season, and I thought Kelty were rubbish. And although he played reasonably well that day, I just thought they beat us. And I just thought, wow, they don't look very good for League One. So that's probably what counted against them there.
Yeah, I suppose that's fair. It's one of those things that's just as a kind of football watcher or a football fan, those kind of very small windows of perception kind of can swing your kind of thoughts on a player or a team. But yeah, no, I totally get what you mean. And yeah, when that link to Aki's kind of seemed to come to, as though it was going to come to fruition, it was a signing that would seem to make an awful lot of sense with Scott Martin out injured. They needed a midfielder. They went and got Ben Williamson, I believe, came in as, I think he was a free agent at the time. I'm trying to remember if he's on loan or if he was as a free agent, but anyway, they went with him instead rather than getting Reece Lyon. But I think Lyon would have been a great fit for Hamilton. All fairness to Aki's, I genuinely think they are a decent team, a really decent outfit, and I think the only reason that they've been picked to the title is just Falkirk's have been so relentless this season. It's you couldn't have really foreseen any team in the division going to this point unbeaten. Like 30 games unbeaten is ridiculous, and I don't think that's a kind of slight on Hamilton. I think they're a really decent side with some really talented players, but for whatever reason, it just hasn't happened for them.
Imagine how good they'd be with Cal Morrison, Alfie Agyemang, Calvin Miller, and Reece Lyon. Wow.
Unbelievable.
Aki's fans just listen to this with a wee tear in their eye. Now, my first choice in central midfield is a slightly off the wall one, and I did consider Reece Lyon, and then I just decided not to. I don't really know why. Just, you've convinced me, so I can drop this guy. Mine is a man whose bio on Twitter is as follows, and this is, I think, how I know that he's a part-time player, even though he plays for a full-time club. His bio reads, "All opinions are my own. Football, tokenization is here. Financial markets, UEFA A license holder. Do what's required." Do you know who that is?
I've got someone in my head, but I don't want to say in case I'm absolutely miles off it. I'm gonna take a guess. Is it Fraser 5A?
It is Fraser 5A.
Yes!
The man has. I've followed him on Twitter for a very long time, just because I follow a lot of lower league players on Twitter. I don't understand what 90% of his retweets are about. Goes completely over my head. It's all to do with there's one about liquidity in the Bank of England. Apparently, at the moment, that's way above my pay grade. If I knew what that was, I'd be working for the Financial Times. But he's obviously a very switched on guy when it comes to whatever tokenization is, because he's heavily involved in that. I picked Fraser 5'8", so I drew up a wee kind of like a long list of players that I wanted to, or thought I might get in, and he was one of the first ones on it, just because I think he's someone who really would suit international football. So in my head, this C team is playing at a very similar sort of, I guess, pace to the international game. Fraser 5A is someone who's phenomenal on the ball, like so good at long range passing. Give him a bit of time, give him a bit of space and a nice big open pitch, and he'll cause opposition teams all sorts of problems. Also meant why I picked this midfield partner was I needed somebody to do the kind of more leggy work of the game. But I think he'll suit that pace of the international game. It's dead ball delivery. Spoke about Finn Ekripon's corners. Fraser 5A's dead ball delivery, going to be on the money. I don't think there are going to be that many part-time players who have the quality that he has on the ball, as evidenced by the career he's had. And you think, his time at Hibs, his time at Dundee United, like everyone rates Fraser 5A, and I think the level, or the fact he's one of Cove's part-time players, I believe, if I've cheated and he's actually full-time, but I believe he's one of their part-time players, is because he wants to be, not because of football inability or anything like that. So Fraser 5A is there. I needed somebody who can slow the game down, dictate the tempo, needed somebody who could really ping a good dead ball in as well, especially given who one of my strikers is. So yes, Fraser 5 has a dreadful Twitter account that I don't understand, and it's incredibly boring. But he will also be playing for my Scotland team. But I won't have to interact with him too much, because once he starts talking to me, I'll just go and speak to someone else. Go and speak to Paul McLean and my captain. Fraser 5 was never considered to be my captain.
Just the kind of crown jewel in the midfield.
Yeah. Look, you're here to take free kicks and you're here to spray the ball about, but please don't talk to me about tokenization, because I do not understand what it is. Don't try and sell me cryptocurrency. I don't understand that.
Yeah, I'm still baffled as to what any of this kind of newfangled crypto stuff is, man. Not a clue.
It does mean a lot that I read out his bio on Twitter and you pretty much immediately knew who I was referring to, though. I like to imagine that a lot of our listeners, as soon as I read that out, they were just shouting at their phones or whatever. It's Fraser 5, it's got to be. The only man in lower league football who tweets about cryptocurrency relentlessly. I think it's cryptocurrency. So I'll go for my next central midfielder, who was picked with Fraser 5 in mind. And it's somebody who is my least favourite player, or probably one of my least favourite players to watch play against Dumbarton. Somebody who I think will complement Fraser 5. He's somebody Dumbarton tried to sign over the summer. I was delighted about that and would have been delighted to have him at the club. And it's Peterhead's Andy McCarthy. Now, the role I see for Andy McCarthy in this team is that he is probably one of the best in the business at winning cheap free kicks, just positioning his body, taking a wee, don't want to say a dive, just, initiating the contact, winning the free kick, falling on top of the ball, just breaking play up that way. He's absolutely infuriating at it. He's also quite hard, quite likes a tackle. He's decent on the ball. He'll do a good job of picking up, loose balls and second balls and giving them to 5 to do something with. But mainly I've got him in that team just because the international level, it looks like it's quite easy to win free kicks. Like, wee bit of contact, you've got a referee who probably 9 times out of 10 give you it. Now, if Andy McCarthy is able to win free kicks every time I see him in games in Scottish League 2, where quite often referees kind of turn a blind eye to you just being booted up into the air, then I think he would be a really useful player for my team. I wanted a Peterhead player in it. Obviously, at the time that we were doing this, second in League 2, probably not the most exciting team to watch in the lower leagues. But Andy McCarthy, I think he's just such a good player. He's proven that he can play in League 1 as well. So he's maybe somebody who's playing, I don't want to say beneath him at the moment, but he's capable of being a League 1 player, and he's shown that in the past. I think he'll be really good at winding up opposition players. Just one worrying point that I've got between my two midfielders, and my midfield is my worrying area, is that that's quite a lot of yellow cards that 5 is going to pick up when somebody runs past him and he just pulls their shirt, that Andy McCarthy is going to pick up for persistent fouling. So I need to make sure that I have somebody who can come in when they both inevitably get suspended, and I'll do an equal job. But yes, Andy McCarthy is my second central midfielder.
Yeah, he's another one who I kind of considered, but I've went for someone else from Peterhead, who I suppose we'll come on to later. But so for my next pick in midfield, so I've got a midfield 3, but the second of my midfield 3 is, I'm kind of looking at international football and thinking almost the kind of Steve Clarke thing of getting that kind of club mentality. So I have gone for, alongside Reece Lyon, I've gone for his former tag team partner, Dominic Docherty of Annan Athletic. So Dominic Docherty is a player who, again, since Annan's promotion to League 1 this season, I've obviously seen a fair bit of him when we've played up against Annan, and he's a player who's really impressed me whenever we've played against them. Just a player who, decent passer of the ball, fairly strong in midfield as well, likes to kind of fly into tackles when he can. And, he's contributed with goals and assists as well. 30 appearances in all competitions, 8 goals, 7 assists, which is pretty impressive for a midfield player. A goal contribution pretty much every 2 games, which is not bad at all. And yeah, I think he's certainly someone who can add something to this team in general, but also, like you say, having kind of that former partnership with Reece Lyon, it's just an extra wee string in the bow, and that they'll turn up to this imaginary international camp and we'll hit it off straight away.
And you're picking players there based on form as well. So like Dominic Docherty is probably in the form of his career, you would say. It looks like somebody who's really enjoying his football at Annan at the moment. They're going really, really well despite their league position. There's a nice feel about Annan, something that I've spoken about a few times in the podcast. Like, it just looks like a really good place to play your football at the moment. They don't feel like a club in a relegation battle. So you've probably got him going in there feeling quite buoyant about it, into our imaginary camp. Trying to imagine where the imaginary camp would take place. It would have to be somewhere like Largs, wouldn't it? That's where all these things sort of take place.
Or you could get the kind of you've had Scotland fans for many years talking about this hypothetical super stadium in Stirling. So for our team, we just have it at Fourth Bank.
Yeah, that makes a lot of sense. And also, I could walk if it was at fourth bank.
There you
so
go.
That's even better.
Bonus.
So I wouldn't need to bother parking the car, or it's like 10 minutes in the car. So that's actually really suitable. So we'll have our training camps at fourth bank. Just play the games there as well.
Yeah.
It's just a really good stadium. Just makes perfect sense.
Absolutely. I mean, to have Scotland fans on terrace and behind either goal, I mean, yeah, atmosphere would be phenomenal.
See if somebody from the SFA isn't listening to this and thinking these guys have a superb point. Like, they've thought of everything. They've got the squad. We'll just bail out the players. The only sticking point I see is the clubs might be quite cross at us borrowing their part-time players and then potentially breaking them and telling them that you're only in the team because I couldn't get another left back because the one I wanted was in a club that I already had a player from. So, like, you're my ninth choice.
Because we made up funny rules for this imaginary team.
Because it would just be too difficult, or we wanted to make it more difficult and take up more hours at work. They're like, oh, no, can't put that. I've got a Montrose player. It needs to be a Stranraer left back. And just there's a whole chaotic thing going on. Actually, I wonder who the manager would be as well. Should really have thought of that. Anyway, that's another podcast. If you want to listen to that might be on Patreon at some point in the future, so please subscribe. And if there's public demand, I'm sure we can do a management team as well. Okay, talk to me about your third midfield player.
So my third midfield player is going to be someone who will probably be doing a lot of the kind of line breaking runs in behind, a lot of the attacking running, and somebody who I know you're probably a big fan of is Dumbarton's Finlay Gray. So Finlay Gray is a player who I first seen when I just happened to last season. I think Falkirk were maybe playing away from home and none of my pals were game for going to the game. I was really bored and I was like, I'm just going to go along to a Steny game. Went along to a game at Oakville View, which was Stennismuir 1, Dumbarton 3, I believe. And I seen this wee ginger guy run through the whole team, miss a chance initially, and then dink it over the keeper. And I was like, yeah, this guy's quite fun. Finlay Gray is a player who is probably one of the most promising talents in League Two, can play through the middle. I'm sure he could play it wide as well. Really energetic, good in the ball, like a good ball carrier. And a number of his kind of goals and assists this season have come from good bits of dribbling. One just at the weekend against Bonnyrigg Rose, setting up Blair Malcolm, just holding up the play, taking on his man, and then playing a ball across the box. He's just a player who I think has a real amount of potential to go far in the game, whether that's up to League One, up to the Championship, or you never know, potentially further. But I think that he's someone who's definitely got a good career in football ahead of him, and he's someone who I've been really impressed with. Every time I've seen bits and bobs of him. So part of my work is I put together the Lower League highlights show for the SPFL YouTube channel. So I've seen like a lot of his kind of best bits this season. The best of which probably the goal away at Forfar Athletic, which I've written down because it just reminded me of Yaya Toure versus Sunderland in the League Cup final many years ago. Just that ball across the edge of the box and just curling in at the far corner. So yeah, he's just a player who I really like the look of.
I'm quite excited to see what happens to Finlay Gray over the summer. So he's out of contract at Dumbarton. I think Suns will be due a wee bit of compensation because of his age and because he's been at the club for 2 seasons. Over the summer gone, he was very heavily linked with Queen of the South. There was a wee bit of interest, or in fact, there was offers made from Queen of the South, and I just felt at the time, and I actually told him this as well, so maybe I played a part, almost certainly not, but I did tell him that maybe wasn't the right move because I think there's a bigger move on the horizon for him, and it felt like Queen of the South was maybe, that's your first offer of full-time football, just kind of hang fire. I think there might be something better at it. At the start of the season, I think his head was maybe a wee bit all over the place just with that move, and it took him a bit of time to get up to speed, but he's really hitting form at the right time again. The other aspect about Finlay is that he is just such a pleasant guy, like just such a lovely, like the sort of person that you would love him to be your son. So if your son turned up like Finlay Gray, it's like really well spoken, incredibly polite. Like, I imagine he's a very avid listener. I know from talking to our video analyst that there were things that they wanted to work on in his game that they would maybe show him clips of. 2-3 weeks later, he was doing those things that they needed him to work on. So when he first came to the club, he used to get left up at corners a lot. He was really, really bad at doing that role where he was going to have to be the last defender and, because he's got that pace, he can recover, make a tackle, just hold a player up or something like that. Now, it looks like he's added that to his game. He's getting a lot better at using the ball. You saw that with the goal against Bonnyrigg. You saw that with the goal in the 6-2 game against Spartans. the final minute, he just kind of turns on the afterburners, burns past a couple of players, flicks James Graham in on goal, and he turns it into the net. Because that was the one thing that I always felt like Finlay physically is phenomenal. I mean, I've never seen a player with the pace that he's got to get away from players dribbling with the ball. And that's any game we all kind of thought, oh, like, hang on a minute here, what have we got on our hands? He's just ran in injury time, having played 90 minutes in central midfield in quite a bit of heat, especially for a ginger guy, you know, it was quite warm that day. He's just burned from the edge of his own box to the other end of the pitch. Not only, missed a chance, but then composed himself to dink it over the keeper. And you saw that in fits and starts last season. There were maybe games where he was guilty of trying to do that again, and teams started to get wise to him. So he had to learn maybe a wee bit about when to release the ball, when to put a cross in, when is not the time to try and burn past everybody. And I think he's really adding that to his game. And I'm excited to see where he goes over the summer. Like I said, he's a genuinely lovely guy. He's also a boyhood Dumbarton fan. Like, we don't have very many fans who have played for us. So to be in that position, and I spoke to him after the Bonnyrigg game, and he had said, I'd said, how much would it mean to you to get Dumbarton promoted? Didn't say before you leave the club, but I think we all know that he's going to be going on to bigger and better things over the summer. And he was just like, see, for my granddad, like, it would just be amazing to be a part of a Dumbarton team promoted after all the years that he's supported them, to like see his grandson helping Dumbarton to promotion. And you just, how can you not love something like that? So no, I didn't pick Finlay because I picked another Suns player, but just a really great guy, a player with a really high ceiling, and I hope his next move, wherever it is, I hope it's the right one for him, because I think he's somebody who is maybe a bit of a rough diamond, who is a bit rough around the edges. The right coaching, like, he has all the attributes physically, mentally, with the ball at his feet to go on to be a really good player, potentially, even pushing back towards the Premiership, obviously having come through at St Mirren. So yes, that's a player who I would be delighted to have in my squad. I haven't, but I would be delighted to have him there.
Yeah, he's certainly. I think he's a good fit for my team, and also I think we've in terms of what I've said and now what you've said, you've now talked me into trying to get John McGlynn to sign him up for Falkirk next season. So thank you.
That might have been a mistake, but I'd rather he went to Falkirk and Queen of the South. Like, if I go to advise him over the summer in my Twitter DMs, I'm like, then I'll advise him. I hate the idea of Marvin Bartley's listening to this thinking that I'm the reason that Finlay Gray didn't sign. Like, that's definitely not what happened. I just said that I felt that if he stuck with us for another season, helped us to win the league, or promotion. Win the league would have been better, but promotion, then I felt like there was a good move. And actually, to be fair, Falkirk's a sort of club that I think would be the right step in terms of the size of club that I think he could go to. So yeah, I'm looking forward to seeing what he does. And he won't be eligible for this team in a year's time. I'm confident saying that. So my final pick in midfield, on left wing, is somebody that came up a wee bit earlier when you were talking about Andrew Steeves. It is Blair Lyons. Now, I think it's because I've got that soft spot for Montrose that I just have a real soft spot for Blair Lyons. Like, I remember him in his first season thinking, this guy, like, coming from university football, he looks absolutely class. He was probably the only winger I saw in League One who gave Regan Tumulty a really tough time during he had about 4-month loan spell at the Rock from Morton that season, and he was the only one who gave him a really tough time, just ripped him to shreds in a game at the Rock. I thought, this guy looks absolutely superb. Then he got the move to Partick Thistle, and at the time I thought that's the right move for him. So maybe I shouldn't be advising players on moves, but I thought that was the right move for him. I thought Ian McCall's the sort of manager who will get a good amount out of someone like Blair Lyons. He's been good at getting flair players going, gives them that wee bit of kind of creativity. He's also going to a club in a league that he knows, in League One, but a bigger club, a full-time club. And it never happened. And I think it's a bit of a mystery why it never happened for him there, because I think he's easily good enough to play full-time. And I think it's a bit of a shame that it didn't, but this was lost, Montrose's gain. This season, he is maybe one of these players who, I put down in my notes, like, he maybe looks better than he is if you were to judge him purely based on numbers. So at the time we were doing this, 7 goals and 5 assists is fine. It's not, it's not world beating. It's not the sort of numbers that's going to have bigger clubs looking at him. But I have a real soft spot for him. He's a bit of a maverick. I think he's quite capable of creating something out of nothing. That wee bit of flair in the team is something that I'm looking for. He'll work hard for the cause. I like the idea of this Scotland international team having Callum Morrison on one side and Blair Lyons on the other side. Like, go on, bring your best Welsh and Northern Irish and English semi-professional footballers and see how they deal with that.
No, I absolutely agree. I mean, Blair Lyons is a player who, again, was in consideration for my own team. He's a player who, over the past 5 years of Falkirk being in League One, he's been one of those players who's really, really impressed me throughout. As you say, getting that move to Partick Thistle, you thought that seems like the right next step for him. And yeah, it just never worked out. But no, he's went back to Montrose, and I think you're absolutely spot on when you say the numbers maybe don't do him justice. But he's just one of those players that you just like to watch. He loves getting the ball, loves trying to take players on, and he's just got that bit of flair about him and that kind of X factor, that a kind of intangible thing that you just go, I like him. He's good fun.
Yeah, it's just, that's the thing. Like, I think you put your finger on it perfectly when you're like, he's just a good player to watch. He's just, see, if you're paying your money to watch football, Blair Lyons is the sort of guy that will get you through the door. And I would, if I was a Montrose fan, I think he's maybe quite settled now. Like, that's his level, being one of the top part-time players in the country. Montrose are great at keeping a hold of players. I mean, like you said, Andrew Steeves has been there since he must have been about 8. And, you know, Terry Masson and Paul Watson, like, have racked up something ridiculous. Like, between them must be touching 700 odd appearances for the club. I think if they can keep a hold of Blair Lyons, which I suspect they will, he's going to be one of these players that their fans talk about very fondly in years to come. And I'm never going to see him play for Dumbarton probably, so I'll just have to see him play for Scotland instead.
I'm absolutely settled for that, and genuinely, the more and more that we're talking here, Fraser, I'm starting to think we should start petitioning for this Scotland C team thing to actually happen.
It really does sound like a good idea, and the only thing that's going to be in the way is the clubs, but that's fine. We can gloss over the clubs. We can throw them some money. There'll be big TV companies wanting to sponsor it, so it'll be fine.
That's it. It'll be fine.
Right, you have gone with a 4-3-3. I've semi-lost track, but I believe we should be on to the first member of your front three.
So I've already got Cal Morrison, who I've mentioned, so it will be my second member of the front three. I'll go to left wing, which I've gone for a player who, I'll be honest, I didn't really know much about until the start of this season. That was because they'd been playing Lowland League football last season. I went for Spartans' Cammy Russell, who is a player who you'll know all about after his absolute world-class free kick against Dumbarton in that 6-2 win for the Suns. A game where there was 3 free kicks scored, 2 from Ryan Blair and that one from Cammy Russell, which is genuinely one of the best free kicks I've seen in a long, long time. It's about 30, 35 yards out, and he just curls it right into the top corner. It was one of those ones that it's like very just aesthetically pleasing, the fact that it goes almost so high up and you think that's clearing the crossbar, and then it just dips into the top corner. Yeah, a player who has kind of really caught the eye in League Two this season. Someone who I think played league football. I believe he was at Airdrie as a youngster. Ended up dropping out of the leagues. Has played his last few seasons with Spartans. I think he may have been Spartans Player of the Year in the Lowland League last season. Certainly scored a bunch of goals. I think it was 17 goals in the Lowland League last season, and has just kind of made the step up to League Two look really seamless. A player who it seems like he's got a fairly big frame about him for a wide player. One of those players who you often think of wingers as like just wee guys, wee nippy guys, but he seems to have like a decent frame about him. But yeah, just a really technical player, kind of skips past players with relative ease. He's got an absolute thumper of a strike on him, not just from free kicks, but some of his just kind of goals from open play, even ones in the box. Like, he's got an absolute cannon of a left foot on him. That's also another kind of part of my thinking, is the fact that he's left-footed, Cal Morrison's right-footed. That balance, they can play either side or they can switch wings. You know, it's all about the way that the team plays, isn't it?
That Cammy Russell free kick. So I was stood kind of on the other side of the dugouts at Ainsley Park, so kind of left-hand side of the home dugout, sorry. So I was kind of right behind it, and as he was stepping up to take it, so Blair Henderson had got injured in winning the foul that led to it, so he was receiving a bit of treatment, and friend of the terrace, Danny Denham, was warming up in front of me, and he sort of crouched down as Cammy Russell stepped up to take it, and I was like, oh, thanks very much for getting out of my way, and he was just like, aye, no bother, don't worry, this will go in. Some wee comment like that, and I was like, fair enough, whatever. Just the normal sort of chat that you get from players at that sort of level at the sidelines. And the ball kind of looked up and down, and it must have been me, people I was stood with, and I'm fairly certain one of the Spartan subs all just went, Jesus Christ, because it went so high and then dipped so quickly and so suddenly. It was a phenomenal strike, and Cammy Russell, Spartans generally have impressed me a lot this season. Even in the 6-2 game, they made a lot of mistakes defensively. I don't think they were all that bad. They just had a kind of freak bad day at the office. But Cammy Russell, is a player that I rate massively. I don't know where his next move will be if you'll want to be away, because Spartans are another club who are really good at keeping players. If I was someone like Stenhousemuir going up into League One, he would be the sort of guy I was targeting. He also has another thing that might be useful to this team. He's got a really long throw on him, which you don't expect from a winger.
Yeah, that's very true. You don't. That's definitely not the kind of attribute that you normally put to like a kind of tricky winger with a free kick. But he certainly seems as though he's got every kind of string to his bow. I didn't know about the long throw. I knew that he's a pretty silky player on the ball and he's got a good strike on him. But the long throw is new to me. But also, I kind of mentioned obviously the free kick against Dumbarton, but he also scored one against Peterhead earlier in the season. Which my favourite thing about the whole thing is that the footage of the goal. So basically, he was probably about similar kind of distance away from goal as he was for the Dumbarton free kick, but he was really far out wide. So you'd expect him just to like swing across in. So much so that the Spartans cameraman is literally just like positioned his camera towards the box, and you can just see the 2-man wall just in the corner. You can't see Cammy Russell, and then you just see this ball just flying into the net, and you go, "Oh, he's missed the actual free kick being taken," because he's obviously expecting it just to be floated in the box for a header, but no, he just had a pop from distance and curled it in beyond the goalkeeper. So yeah, again, more kind of general point on Spartans. I totally agree with you that generally just really impressed with them. Falkirk played Spartans in our first game of the season in the Viaplay Cup, and that was at Ainsley Park. We ended up winning 2-1, a late goal from Ross McKeever. But yeah, just they seem like a really good kind of solid unit, and I think they've got the potential to be one of the best run part-time clubs in the country, just because I think they seem to just seem to be well run at the moment, and also they seem to, being Edinburgh based, they've probably got a good pick of a lot of kind of part-time players living in the central belt and whatnot, and having been able to get guys like Callum Booth, James Craigan, etc. to play at that level of football now, like, just obviously speaks volumes. I think one of the biggest factors, I recently spoke to Blair Henderson for a wee interview for the SPFL socials, and Blair basically said that one of the biggest factors in him joining Spartans was Dougie Samuel. Just says everyone absolutely loves him.
I really wanted to hate Spartans. I think I didn't like their stance on B teams. I thought that I didn't like the fact they tried to buy Edinburgh City's place in the league, or there was some talk about that. I just thought, no, I really want to dislike this team. Went to Suns played them in the second game of the season, and they are comfortably the loveliest club to be around. Like, just the most pleasant people. Every single person associated with them. You go to Ainsley Park, and there's obviously a lot of people in Spartans trackies and things like that who are maybe, coaches with their boys' clubs or girls' teams or whatever, who are there on a Saturday, and every single one of them genuinely lovely. Their players, all just real class acts. Like, if you have Dougie Samuel as that figurehead, who is, based on the very brief interaction I've had with him, just a genuinely lovely man with like a terrific sort of backstory in football and all the work that he's done through the Spartans Community Foundation and all that. He actually might be my pick for the manager for the team. The more I think about it, he'd be a great ambassador for it. But every single person associated with Spartans, just so lovely. Like, just such a friendly club to be around. And like I said, I wanted to hate them. And I've actually ended this season with like a real admiration for them, I'm almost developing a wee bit of a soft spot for them, although beating them 6-2 last time possibly has helped with that, because everyone seems nicer. But even stood doing post-match after the game, they'd just been dubbed 6-2 at home, and every single one of their players made a wee, safe journey home, guys, see you later, guys, just sort of comment as they went out. Nobody's head was drooped and they were in a bad mood or anything like that. So yeah, I really like Cammy Russell, really like Spartans, really like Dougie Samuel, and the more I think about it, the more I want him in charge of this team. So there you go, manager sorted. For my, so I've gone 4-4-2, obviously. My first striker will be my Dumbarton man, and that is Michael Ruth, somebody who you'll remember from his relatively unsuccessful time at the Bairns a few years ago. Michael Ruth only has 12 goals this season, so he's not the most prolific striker, and it would have been quite easy to pick someone with more goals than him, maybe like a Blair Henderson, a Matty Aitken, or someone like that. But I'm thinking that he's sort of my Shea Adams in this team. Somebody who runs the channels really well, holds play up really well. He always looks a threat. He's comfortable as a lone striker. Really strong. He can occupy defenders. Just doesn't score quite as many goals as you would have liked. But every other aspect of his game is so good. And this has been a real breakthrough season for Michael Ruth at Dumbarton. So he went to Falkirk, I think he would have been 18, 19 when he was at Falkirk. He would have been quite young when he was there, as a member of a team under Paul Sheeran that really, really struggled. Maybe wasn't the greatest environment for him at that sort of age. He'd been at Arbroath before that on loan when he was, again, maybe 17, 18 years old. Didn't start a lot of games. He went to Queen of the South last season. I think he started 3 games in the league or 2 games in the league, something like that. Only got 1 goal. And I don't ever see him being a 25 goal a season man, but he brings so much more to the team than that. And he's another one that I'm interested. I don't think Suns have a chance of keeping him. And there was some talk about where he would end up. If I was a full-time team in League One, I would be very tempted by Michael Ruth. Personally, I think he'd be a great fit somewhere like Alloa, Montrose. Alloa is the one that really comes to mind just because it's closer to Dumbarton. It's Andy Graham's in charge, so he'll obviously have a wee bit of an idea or half an eye on how Dumbarton are getting on. Connor Salmon's getting older, Bobby Wales will go back to Kilmarnock, so there's probably a gap there for a striker. I just think he could be a really, really good League One player. Now he's got, this season he'll probably have started more than 30 games. You'd fancy him to finish maybe with, he's got 12 goals to his name as we record this, it's still March, so you would fancy him to finish the season probably with 15 or so, and all his goals have been from open play. He's not Dumbarton's penalty taker, which is quite unusual for a centre forward. So I have gone for Michael Ruth. I think he suits the sort of the mould of a Scotland striker if you're playing one up front in this imaginary C team. I'm playing 2 up front, but in this imaginary sort of C team scenario, I can see him being he'll be our Shea Adams.
Yeah, I totally can understand that pick. He's definitely developed so much since obviously his short loan stint at Falkirk. As you say, he wasn't too successful, but I think in fairness to Michael Ruth, that he was a teenager who was being asked to be Falkirk's main striker, in a time when Falkirk were really struggling. So yes, certainly someone who's came on leaps and bounds, scored a few nice goals. He's been some of his kind of interplay and whatnot as well. Yeah, it's been really interesting to see how much he's developed. And yeah, totally agree that a club like Alloa, he just almost seems as though like if you could slot him into that Alloa team just now, kind of that front as part of that front three with likes of Bobby Wales, Ethan Sutherland, Taylor Stephen, any of them kind of interchange with one of those guys. Yeah, I think he'd kind of fit like a glove. Also
has an astonishingly good head of hair, like just unbelievable. The strength of his hairline, just the volume in it, just absolutely magnificent. So that's another impressive trait to add to him. One I'm very jealous of.
I'm very jealous.
Yeah. I think you might be fractionally more jealous than me, but possibly not for a great deal longer. Who is your second choice, it'll be your final choice for this 11, and it'll be your centre forward.
So yeah, my striker choice. So it's an interesting one. You kind of said you went for Michael Ruth, who isn't like someone who's scored like an absolute barrel load of goals. I've actually got someone who's scored even less goals than that. I've got someone who I really like the look of in terms of his all-round play. Feel like he's a fairly unselfish striker. He scored a few goals, set up a few goals as well, and I think he's again someone who's got a fairly kind of high ceiling in the game. Not to say that he's going to end up playing in the Premiership, but someone who I think will go on to have a decent career, and that is Peterhead's Kieran Shanks. And kind of reasoning behind that, I was first of all, I was kind of swithering on who to pick, and I was almost thinking, so this is going back to my earlier point about Callum Morrison, that he likes kind of playing with as the main man in the attacking line and having someone like Ross McKeever beside him. And I'm not saying that Kieran Shanks is similar to Ross McKeever in terms of that kind of physical presence or whatnot, but from what I've seen, he's a player who is good in the ball, and as I say, really unselfish. Some of his kind of, I was having a look at some of his kind of goals and assists earlier today, and there was one or two of his assists where a lot of other strikers, especially young strikers, would absolutely just pull the trigger, being kind of going through on goal under a bit of pressure, definitely just going to shoot. But he has the composure and the awareness just to lay it on a plate for Rory McAllister or Conor O'Keefe or whoever in the attacking line for Peterhead. He's a player who obviously had a stint at Arbroath, just never really quite hit the heights. Obviously, a really young guy who was playing Championship football just didn't really work out. Has now dropped into League Two, and I think has really found himself a home at Peterhead, part of an attacking lineup. Who, to be fair, all three of these players were under consideration for me, which were Conor O'Keefe and Hamish Ritchie. Hamish Ritchie is one of those players, again, a bit like yourself and Blair Lyons. Ever since I first seen him, I just really like him. I think he scored a few really good goals when he first joined Peterhead from the Highland League. I think there was one against Clyde where he skins about 4 boys and scores. One of those kind of intangibles that you just really like them. But no, went for Kieran Shanks, and I think one of his recent goals, the one against Stranraer, which reminded me slightly of, this is going to be a really niche shout, but do you remember a goal from a guy called Matty Burrows from
Yes, for Glentoran?
Yes, the Glentoran boy. The cross comes in and he backheels it into the top corner. So Kieran Shanks' goal against Stranraer was a less spectacular version of that, but a lovely goal nonetheless. A good low cross coming in from the left-hand side, and Shanks just has the awareness to flick this leg out, a back heel into the bottom corner. Lovely finish. And I think that he would really kind of suit this team. As I say, Callum Morrison's probably the main goal threat in this team, but I'm sure Shanks could contribute and kind of work well with Callum Morrison and Cammy Russell in attack, and obviously with Finlay Gray making those darting runs forward as well. I think it's a really exciting attacking lineup.
One of these guys with a wee bit of a swagger about him as well, which is always going to be useful. Like, again, quite unlikable for opposition fans, which is always a benefit when he's on your team. In terms of unlikable for opposition fans, this is somebody who I actually really like as an opposition fan, even though he really caused my team problems last season. My final pick and my striker is none other than Annan Athletics' Tommy Goss. He's firstly really big, which I quite like, and I went on the basis that Queen of the South players who aren't prolific for them has worked before for the national team. So why wouldn't it work again with another really big guy? Tommy Goss is somebody who last season I likened to Harry Kane, which I'm taking as a good sign, in that he'll miss a few chances and he'll look a bit ungainly, he'll look a bit gangly, and then he'll just pop up and stick the ball in the bottom corner, then get another one, stick it in the top corner, and you'll think, oh, right, okay, I can see how this guy has scored so many goals. I feel like Tommy Goss is the sort of man in this Scotland team who's going to score important goals. I also feel like he's going to become a national hate figure because people won't like him because he's got such a kind of weird, awkward style. I remember, I think it was Craig Telfer on the season preview podcast a couple of years ago, described him as looking like a man who wasn't comfortable with the size of his own body. And there are times where you look at Tommy Goss and he kind of looks like a man in a costume of a much bigger man. You know, you get people in there in like mascot costumes and they're just maybe not comfortable. He sometimes looks like that. I think he's a really good player, and he's not been as prolific this season as he was last year, but he still had quite a solid not first season in League One because he was obviously in the Championship, I think, with Queen of the South a few years ago, but had his opportunities limited there. He looks like a player who's adept at playing in League One, who's probably only going to get better. I think he'll bring something quite different to this team, like the idea of him and Michael Ruth up front. I think there's a lot of physicality there. I think he brings maybe more of a natural goal threat than Michael Ruth does. Michael Ruth's the sort of guy who can maybe put it on a plate for Goss. He's going to create chances for him. So yes, Tommy Goss, the lower league Harry Kane, the man who's going to become a national hate figure because of his languid style, is my final pick.
Yeah, I think that's a really fair and good pick. Tommy Goss is, again, just kind of the reasons that you said. He's a player who I was really keen to see at the start of this season, how he would get on in League One. Obviously, it would have been really hard for him to replicate his scoring form in League Two because he was just banging them in last season. But yeah, I think he's really kind of equipped himself really well to League One football. And in recent weeks, seeing some of his kind of highlights and bits of play, some of his goals and whatnot, he's one of those players who's kind of deceptively good on the ball. You just expect him just to be a big lump, and he can be a big lump. You can whip balls into the box, and I mean he's lethal in the air. He's someone who will win a lot of headers in the opposition box, but he's good on the floor as well. You know, he's scored some really nice goals over the piece for Annan, and yeah, just someone who I think would be kind of, as you say, leading the line as a former Queen of the South striker. You know, Scotland fans seem to quite like those. And just a totally different point, I was thinking about this the other day, but if you went back to that Queen of the South team from a few years back and you said that one of those strikers is going to be playing for Scotland, I would have said that's possible, but I just never would have thought it was going to be the big Australian guy.
No, and especially given that Queen of the South fans, I think they had quite a love-hate, verging more towards the hate relationship up until that last season when him and Stephen Dobby struck up that phenomenal partnership. But yeah, I remember Dumbarton played them, I think it might be in the season we got relegated. Queen of the South fans were giving Lyndon Dykes like stinking abuse. He didn't have a very good game, just kind of attracts it because of his style, being the bigger guy, being quite lanky at that point in his life as well. And I remember their fans saying, somebody saying, I don't know any Queen's fans that rates Dykes. I don't know how he's getting a game. And I remember posting on Pine Bovril, I really like his boots, so I quite rate him on that front. He had really nice white Mercurials that, back in the day. Another thing about Tommy Goss, actually, just before we sign off, that when Dumbarton signed Sean Crichton, he had I went to shake his hand and he had his finger on a kind of strapping thing. I had asked him what he did with it, and he said that was grappling with Tommy Goss at a corner. So he must be phenomenally strong. He manages to break somebody's finger grappling with him at a corner.
Wow, that's actually quite scary to think that's just coming from jostling at a corner kick.
So either Sean Crichton has very weak fingers, but he doesn't look like he would. He's quite strong. Or Tommy Goss is just phenomenally strong and phenomenally physical. So yeah, another aspect of having his team. Watch out for your fingers. Wales and England and everything else. See, we've got Tommy Goss in the scene. Anyway, that seems like a lovely way for us to sign off, talking about Tommy Goss breaking someone's fingers. Sean, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Fraser. It's been an absolute joy coming up with a hypothetical team. I mean, I remember sitting in school and making up kind of hypothetical dream teams on writing them down on pieces of paper. So it's quite nice to do it in a lower league Scottish football sense and actually bringing it to life.
I'm extremely excited to listen back to this podcast in 5 years' time when all of these guys are playing in the West of Scotland League. And it looked just like a horrendous bit of attempted foresight. But yeah, as I said, that's all we've got time for. I will do my best Craig Fowler impression and try and sign off in a professional way by urging you to subscribe to the Terrace Podcast YouTube channel. Fowler has set a target of 1,000 subscribers by the end of the season. If we do that, then all of us as contributors get a big cash prize, I'm told. So please, I urge you to go and subscribe to the Terrace Podcast YouTube channel to get that. Don't forget to follow us on Twitter/X, as we are now legally obliged to say, on TikTok, Facebook, God knows what else, Instagram, MySpace, MSN Instant Messenger, WhatsApp, whatever else is available. Please go and subscribe and get all that Terrace Podcast content injected into your veins. Don't forget, if this is not enough for you, then you can subscribe to the Patreon. I don't know the address. Craig Fowler will know the address and can always dub his own voice in over me while I try and advertise it. But yeah, please subscribe to the Patreon for, I think it's 5 shows a week, something in that region, just as much Scottish football content as you can deal with. But we are well over the 1 hour that we promised that this would be, so I will be getting daggers from Craig Fowler now for doing this. Thank you very much for joining us. Sean, thank you for being here, and thank you for your contributions. You've made me realise that I'm probably picking a quite solid squad, so that's made me feel better because we had quite a lot in common there.
Yeah, we did. It's been a blast.
Excellent. Good first date. Would see him again. Thank you, guys.